All right, welcome back to the show. We have two special guests today, and I know everybody who's been in high school has probably read Beowulf, and it's a great story. But my guests today have adapted it in a different, well, yeah, I'm going to say a different way, and it's Beowulf. So let me bring in the writer Zach Weinersmith and the artist Boulet. And so let me just do this, and hello. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
So before we get into talking about the book, why don't you guys tell me a little bit about yourselves and about your experience with comic books? Do you remember maybe the first one you read, or maybe the first cartoon strip that kind of got hooked? So I'll let you guys decide who goes first. And
You'll probably have better stories than I do. I was less of a comic nerd.
You were not a comic nerd when you were a kid?
I was a mild comic nerd, but my sense is you were an absolute comic nerd. Is that right?
I was about to say you should start because you will have references that people know more than mine. I was in France, so I have all the classical, what we call Franco-Belge, like French and Belgian comics, like Tintin and the Smurfs and stuff like that. But yeah, that's how I got my first foot in the world of comics.
Yeah, I was more of a. I never got the hang of superhero comics. It just wasn't for me even when I was a kid. I was more of a comic strip guy. I read a lot of like The Far Side and I read a lot of Dilbert, which is becoming an unfortunate thing to mention now. But what do you
yes, same here. I feel your pain.
Yeah,
you drew a very good one. I love your Dilbert.
Oh,
comic.
thank you. I drew Dilbert Reckoning with his existence comic. It was my contribution to the art form. But let's not go to Dilbert. Let's go somewhere happier.
Yeah. So Zach, tell me a little bit about yourself, a little bit of your background. This is you're not usually a cartoon writer.
Yeah.
Right? Or...
Well, my background as a cartoonist, I assume, is what you want, not my life story here. Yeah, so I started drawing comic strips in the early days of webcomics, like in the late '90s. And I didn't think I could make a career of it. And then at some point, I was actually working in the Los Angeles film business and hating it deeply, and decided to try making a career in comics. And I think I was able to quit my day job sometime in my early 20s. And since then, my main thing is drawing a daily comic strip. But my view is that if you have a little safety in your career, you ought to do weird stuff. And my understanding is Boulet feels the same way, and that's kind of why we're here.
And so, Boulet, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, me. Well, I wanted to do comics, so I went to an art school in France, in Strasbourg, and at the time I was just planning on drawing. I didn't have a specific plan. I wanted to do illustration, comics, maybe animation. Everything looked fine to me. I think I was leaning more to animation. I really wanted to learn that, but I was broke. So I was participating to a lot of, art competitions. There would be a competition to earn some money by doing a poster for a festival or stuff like that. And I did a lot of that. And at some point, a publisher noticed me because I had won a prize for a comic festival in Switzerland. And they were creating a magazine. So I started working with them. And even before I could graduate, I was already working professionally in comics. I was 25 when I released my first book. And since then, I've done, I don't know, I think over 40 of them, and I'm still going with it.
So I read the book and I love it. I mean, like I said before, as a American high school student, Beowulf was pretty much required reading. So why Beowulf? And tell us a little bit about your spin on this, your guys' spin on the story.
I majored in English literature in college, so I have a lot of familiarity with these books, and I had the idea that it would be fun to sort of turn it into a kid's book, and you can see how it kind of works as a kid's story, because at core we had this good thing going and somebody ruined it. Like that's the whole story really. And I feel like I got lucky. I hit on this idea early on of so the theme in the book is that there's the bad guy doesn't want to kill the kids. That would be a little much for children. He's trying to turn them into the sort of worst kind of adults, adults who are, just want to watch cable news all day and, think about their mortgage and that sort of stuff. And what that idea ended up being very rich, because what's fun about it is it works. I think it works for kids mostly because it's like a diss on the adults. Like whatever adult you're reading it with, they are being insulted like for a significant portion of the book. Hopefully in a way they find funny too. But also it just kind of like it makes it a little more serious, right? Because it's this kind of like, the original Beowulf, I think, nobody knows why it was written, and but there, a usual view is it's about mortality or how to live well or something. And so what's nice is you can sort of transpose that into a children's world, and it just fits very naturally. So it was fun to do, because it was like, I don't know anyone who has done this exact sort of thing, but once you have the idea, it's just very rich, and it's not hard to keep adding to. But there was no intention to teach children classical literature. If that gets someone to buy a copy, that's great, but it was not the intention.
I'm kind of interested, and we'll get to Boulet's, but my wife bought me this volume of like classic stories that have been transposed into like illustrative stories, and this really kind of reminded me of those, and now I'm gonna have to go into my storage unit and find those. Yeah. So thank you. So Boulet, I mean, what was your experience, or has been your experience with the Beowulf story? And
I didn't know anything about Beowulf. It's not very known in France, actually. There was a movie with Christophe Lambert that I think everyone is trying to forget about. And
we're also trying to forget the Antonio Banderas Eaters of the Dead, based on Michael Crichton's adaptation of Beowulf.
Oh God!
I remember just seeing the one with the CGI Angelina Jolie too.
Yeah.
So that was about everything I knew about the original legend, but. I like this idea of transposing, these old heroic tales to a more modern form. It's a really fun exercise, and I thought Zach did an amazing job. It reminded me, a few years ago, one of my friends was trying to do a similar thing in France, where he wanted to adapt one of his, bigger than life hero as a manga. So it was kind of a similar path, but he didn't do it. He wanted to adapt Jean de l'Ours, which is kind of a French version of Beowulf. And when Zach showed me the book, the thing I always say is I intended to say no. He told me, I have this book for you. I would love you to draw it. And I was drawing like, I think 3 books at the same time at the moment, and I told him, I'm okay to read it, but it's gonna be no. I just want to give you the heads up. And I read the book. I read the first draft of the book, and I couldn't stop reading, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I loved the idea, the concept of it. I loved the writing itself. And I had all these images popping in my head. And I was like, if I don't draw this book, I'm gonna regret it all my life. So I said yes, and after that, the nightmare was, how am I gonna fit that in my schedule?
So, the writing part of it,
Yeah.
were there any challenges, you've kind of faced, or, adapting, this, kind of violent, gory story into, something a little more,
Yeah.
kid friendly?
Yeah. I mean, once you have the idea that instead of death, it's adulthood, you can get past all the violent stuff. I was actually worried that the editor. So I know the original editor, Calista Brill, from an earlier project, but I still didn't mention. I was worried she was going to say, you have to bring the kids back at the end, like back from adulthood. But I really didn't want to do that because it kind of kills the drama of the whole thing. If the kids can return for, it'd be like if at the end of Beowulf, it was like, actually, they were all fine. I was really worried. I just didn't say a word, and she didn't say a word, and we got away with it. In terms of like difficulty writing, the only thing that was tricky is there's some stuff that's makes sense in an adult setting that doesn't make sense for kids. So like the original Beowulf starts with like a kind of hereditary, not a monarchy, but like a hereditary chiefdom and kind of a history of it, or talking about the people in it. And so with the kids, you can't really do that. I mean, it could have been like siblings or something, but I feel like that would be an adult way to do it, not a kid way to do it. A kid way to do it is like whoever's the best, most awesome kid should be the chief. And so I had to like sort of, I wanted to get the feel of that opening, but without the weird like old hereditary stuff, and that's tricky because like part of what's interesting about these old legends is they start in a way that to me is very, very strange, like a modern story. If you hear that there were a bunch of great kings, you're kind of waiting for the bad king to show up, and that's going to be the setting. And this one doesn't do that because these are culture heroes, so they're all just great, and that's the point, is they're all just great. And so that was really fun to get. And you could see, we were now getting lots of reports of kids reacting to it. I was at a signing yesterday, and a little boy came up, and he was talking about how much he loved that part in particular. He liked the girl who was famous for shooting darts into the sky, and it's really cool. So it's like, I hope giving the feel of like what a person would have felt like hearing the original story, except it's for kids. So that kind of thing, the kind of adapting the sense without being able to just steal directly, was tough in a bunch of places.
And Boulet, for on the art side, were there any how did you guys work as a team? Going from the writer, Zach's concept to what ended up on the page.
Well, Zach is hard to work with because he's so enthusiastic. So I was sometimes sending him drawings, and I was not convinced. I was like, I'm not sure about that. I'm gonna send that to Zach, and Zach was like, "Great, it's my favorite drawing ever." And I was like, shoot, it doesn't help me. But for me, well, we had like some trouble at the beginning because I was trying to find the best style I could come up with to fit the story. I wanted something at the same time funny but dark. I wanted something like full of energy, not too stiff. So I didn't want to go through the phases of sketching and drawing and sketching and drawing. I wanted something like that felt pretty natural. So I decided to work on a tablet. I worked on an iPad, so I wouldn't have to sketch because the process of drawing is not the same on an iPad. You just draw, erase, redraw until your drawing is finished. And once we settled for one style, I guess the most challenging part was the acting of the kids, because you had to have kids who are like very serious about their adventure, about the legend that we are telling. But at the same time, sometimes we had to remember they are kids, so they have to behave like kids and heroes at the same time. And sometimes it was hard to feel where should they be super heroic, like being strong and mighty, and when should they act like kids? I remember a precise detail. It was when Beowulf comes to the king the first time, and the king is like mopping on his throne, and I had done like a very heroic pose of the king, you know, like his head between his hands, and Zach told me he's a kid. He should be like lying on the throne crying, like with the expression, "That's not fair." And
yeah. I
and
love that
that's
panel.
the energy we were going for, you know, like having heroic kids, but still kids.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, who are Boulet? When you're drawing books, is what is who are your influences for your style, and is this part of your preferred style, or was it something new that you kind of uh, did for the story?
Well, you know, when you draw, there are like several things you have to work with. So there is what you want to achieve, and there is also like the material problem you can have at a moment. For example, you know, comic strips have a certain format because they were in newspapers, so you have to have a line of frames. And for me, the very specific challenge I had on Beowulf was I was traveling a lot. It was just before COVID, and my fiancée of the time, who is now my wife, is American. So I would travel twice a year from France to the US to spend time with her, and I couldn't just travel with a pile of paper. So that's also a reason why I use the tablet, and the tablet, you know, drove me in a certain direction. But for my more, if you are talking of my more general influences, I guess it's a never-ending list. You know, when you are drawing comics, you take influences from all around you. So old comics artists like Moebius and Bill Watterson, and all the French and Belgian artists I was talking about earlier. And I also worked with a lot of people, so they are like maybe less famous names from the French comic scene, but who have been a huge influences for me because we were students together or because we are friends. And you know, it's like coming from everywhere, I would say.
Yeah, because I mean, I was trying, looking at the art in here, I was trying to, I don't want to say pinpoint, but who the influences are. But I saw a lot of different kind of influences, incorporated into, the characters.
I would say I went with my usual style, but with a layer of darkness on top of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted something more looking like a sketch, you know, almost if it was penciled.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to keep this energy of having something fun and young adult readers looking like. Oh, sorry, I'm losing my English. But also with something saying it's like cross-hatching everywhere. It looks like an old engraved page, and it depends also on what we are saying in the story. When we are in the first phase with all the kids having fun, Zach told me I would like to have like Bruegel but for kids, you know, like these
Mm-hmm.
paintings with partying everywhere. And I was really happy to go there. And when she's fighting monsters and teenagers, I wanted to have like an almost manga energy, having this framing, this motion lines and stuff like that. And when we were going for the really scary part, meaning if you look at the book, you will notice that the monsters are kind of scary, but they are funny. The teenagers are kind of scary, but they are funny. But Grindel is creepy. He's the only one who really, really is creepy. And I tried to put that in the drawing too, having something very dark and menacing when Grindel was here, because he is the only really threatening character.
Yeah, I noticed that. It was one of my favorite things about the book is I was telling someone, I think if I had illustrated it, I would have made that mistake. I would have made the monsters too scary and not left emotional room for Grindel at the end. But because the monsters are like scary cute, it reserves the sort of horror element for that last conflict, and that's yeah, it's one of my favorite things.
Zach, do you have a favorite part of the book, or maybe a favorite character that you know enjoyed writing the most, or was there a
Oh,
character that maybe you didn't like at first? You were like, okay, this is the character here, but as time grew on, you kind of attached to them, and you know.
it's a little tricky because they're heroic story characters, so they're not kind of like they're not as intimate in that sense. I do think like the character of Wendy, who's the only character who's a kind of composite from the original. She's like the original has like 3 or 4 different like watch guard characters, and they're all mushed into one now. And she kind of got a little bigger as we developed the story. But so she was fun to write. But I was actually, in terms of like a favorite part, I have a bunch of favorite panels. Actually, one of my favorite things in terms of the kids is so when I draw, if I have a scene where I'm like, there are kids in the background, I just draw kind of like generic kids. And if you look at all the panels that Boulet drew, there's like, there are no generic kids. Everyone looks like they have their own story. There's this one panel, I think it's the beginning, where like the first king, Carl, is kind of standing over his domain, and there's this kid I love in the front who I think is in a bear costume. He's in a like onesie, and it's just like it's a perfect kid moment because that like you can't as an adult wake up and say today I'm going to be a bear, but as a kid you can, not just I'm going to dress like a bear. You know how kids do. It's like today I am a bear, and I just love that shot. And it has nothing to do with anything else. It's just there's so much specificity. And then I have a favorite panel, which is a kind of subtle one, but I really appreciated, which is there's the kid at the beginning is the king, is Carl, and there's a part where he doesn't literally die, but he becomes a teenager, and they have a kind of funeral for him because he's not going to be a kid anymore. And there's this one panel, right as the last thing you hear about him is there's a line that's something like memories of his misbehaviors would remain for all time. And there's this like lovely panel of him looking down and his face darkened, which is a kind of like traditional, way to draw like a dead person in pain. Like the presidential portrait of John F. Kennedy does the same thing, the head face down with a shadow. And but what I really love about that panel is I'm positive if I drew it, I would have drawn him as a kind of grotesque teenager. Like a kind of mocking, pimply, greasy, gross teenager. But instead, he's clearly a little gawky and awkward because he's a teenager. But he's kind of like a little bit handsome, which is like makes that moment just so much nicer. It sort of tells you like it's like, so to speak, he's gone to a better place. Like not a better place, but like it's okay. He's not going to become like a monster. Like some of the other teenagers you meet, and it's just so sort of it makes the moment that could have been kind of nasty, it makes it a sort of sweet moment. And there's a lot of subtlety like that throughout the book, but that's a favorite panel of
mine. Same question for you, Boulet.
I think for me it was like setting up the scene was the funniest part to draw. I love drawing the partying with all this craze of all these like visual noise. And then drawing the creepy part with Grindel climbing the ladder. I think that was my favorite. But Zach was right. I was trying to find, even if it was only in my head, a story from each kid. There is this thing in video games. I don't know if you play video games, but sometimes. Right now I'm playing like this video game called Genshin Impact, and there is like you have a crowd of character, and there is one who has like diamonds and a robe, and you are like, oh, I have to talk to this one. The other ones are just noise. This one has something to tell, and you can tell when a character is going to be important. And I didn't want that for the kid. I wanted them to be like all equals. They are all wearing costumes that could be made with just stuff from home. Even the king doesn't have like an extraordinary costume. He is just wearing, like underpants over pajamas and nothing more. And it was really fun imagining what was each kid's story. I sometimes, you know, in the background there is, like, for example, a character who has like a puppet on her hand. She has like a sock puppet with googly eyes. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's just a kid who loves puppets. I wanted to have this kind of kids in the background all over the place, and so I had a lot of fun hiding as many details as I could.
I think one of my favorite illustrator pictures was this 2-page spread with the sea monster. It's just beautiful. So what any plans for, you know, adapting any other, you know, stories like Beowulf, or is this just kind of, you know, was this like, I guess, capturing lightning in a bottle or something for you guys?
I don't know how much I should say. We've talked with the publisher about this and that, but maybe.
Okay, well, don't say anything that'll get you in trouble.
I don't think I'll get. Yeah. Let me no comment that one. You know, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna give all the secrets.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's right.
General question: are there if given the opportunity, are there what stories would you like, or would you see yourself wanting to do?
Yeah,
without getting yourself in trouble.
Let me say this is like, I don't. Speaking only for myself, I don't see myself as wanting to be a guy who adapts stories for a living. To tell you the truth, when we were working on this, I don't remember. And this is dumb, but like, I don't remember ever thinking of it as an adaptation. It was more like
me either.
Yeah, it was like, it was source material, but like, I mean, there's a decent amount of. I mean, I think it's sort of emotionally faithful to the original, but like, I worry, like, the moment you say it's an adaptation, you're like, oh, I have to keep everything. And there's stuff that I dumped, and there's stuff that I added. I mean, I could argue for every scene being kind of like emotionally relevant to the original, but like, it was not an attempt to sort of give kids Beowulf. It was an attempt to tell a story that was just inspired by this old story. So, you know, if I was asked, like, Zach, would you be the guy who adapts, you know, classical literature? I wouldn't. That wouldn't interest me. This doesn't sound very fun. This one was just. The way I would say it is, you know, I think the key to this story is not that it's adapting Beowulf. It's the adulthood as death conceit. And so, like, if you said, well, Zach, adapt the Odyssey, I couldn't do it unless I had a similarly rich idea about like how to make it into its own story. So, I mean, I do love these old books. I think they're wonderful, but it's not an ambition of mine to try to do that. Yeah, especially because a lot of those classic stories, the really good ones, they're kids used to read them. Like, it's not like the Iliad is, you know, like you can make kids read Hamlet and they will be like, why am I so bored? But you, like, the Iliad is just like nonstop violence. Like, it's quite readable. So I don't see why you would want to or at least speaking for myself, I wouldn't want to do that.
How about you, Boulet? I mean, is there, you know, any?
Oh, me, I am just pure chaos. You know, I mean, I'm just doing what I want. I have this incredible luxury in my life to be living from my art, and I'm really happy with it. I got some book that gave me enough money to allow me to be picky, to choose my battles, which is for me like the definition of freedom, and I'm so happy I have that. Yeah. So I don't really plan. I have, like I said, I was going to say no to this book, and it was just, you know, like an instant crush on the story. But so I would say I would never do an adaptation because it doesn't really interest me. Yeah. But suddenly something like that happens. So I guess, you know, I just don't. I just don't know what I'm doing. If something looks fun, I'm gonna do it. But for now, I have my own project. I have a lot of pans on the fire. You know, like it's a lot to deal with. But I was so happy to do Beowulf that yeah.
Yeah,
Everything is possible.
this is something I like about the French cartooning culture. I feel like in the U.S., when people have success, they just repeat the thing that was successful for 30 years. And so I am, I like there are a couple American artists who aren't like that. I am trying to be this way. I'm like I have
Yeah.
success as a comic
Oh
strip.
no,
and I
yeah.
think,
We are
you gotta
trying
do
to
weird
lose
stuff.
every time.
That's right. Yeah. I was talking to my daughter about this. Like, you know, if you make a product and you're not scared to death, like if you make a book and you're not scared about it, then you haven't taken enough risk. I mean, you know, you have to make an income, but like you should be a little scared or a little anxious. You know, you should do something weird that maybe everyone's going to hate. You know.
And I think for me it was like a life lesson. It's all the books I have done with a publisher, like very seriously, etc., were not my most successful books. Every time I had a crazy project, that's what brought me more fame, quote unquote, because we are talking about comics, and and money, quote unquote, because we are talking about comics. But yeah, I was working with a publisher. I had like a stable series where I could have drawn for years, and I decided to go into webcomics just for fun. And webcomics went so much better than my regular books. And it was the same with Zach. You know, I was like, oh, no one knows me in the US. This book is going to be just a fun experience. And suddenly we have like a lot of praise for this book, and I am as surprised as I am happy about it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I was shocked by how well it was received. Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you guys wanted to mention about the book that maybe we didn't cover? Or,
That's a hard question.
Or
Oh,
well,
the thing I want to give a little praise about Zach's writing again, because I think for me that was one of the things that seduced me about this book. It was all these alliterations, you know, all this old language. As a kid, I loved that. I loved when the book felt a little bit too complicated for me. Yeah. And it's a really fun book to tell. And I was always, every time I'm talking about this book, I am telling people, it's not a book you just give to kids. It's a book you read to kids. You have to scream this book. You have to say it aloud and impersonate the characters and make the voices. It's very important. And after that, you can give it to your kids and they can browse the picture and stuff. But first, you should scream it to your kids.
You have to scream it, yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to reading it to my 6-year-old, who, if even though my wife doesn't like my, comics, and, I've been slowly, getting him into it. Like he's really big into Sonic right now. So we've been reading the Sonic, the Hedgehog comics. And so, this is something perfect that we can, have over, like a month or so to read.
Well, and you can see, it's classical literature. So you can tell your wife it's not comics. It's
not comics. It's because we're getting them a heads up.
That's right. It
counts as
culture.
Cultural. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to keep you guys too long because I know you guys are busy. But if you guys want to take turns, kind of, just pitching the book and letting people know where they can pick it up. I mean, of course, people should, first try to order it through their local comic book shop because we need to support them. But also, let us have. I know you guys both have, other projects you work on. Feel free to, talk about them and tell people where they can check them out, and also tell us where we can, if you're on social media, where we can follow you.
Well,
that was a lot.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna start because I think Zach is struck by the question. First, if there are like some French people lost here, just so they know, we managed to have a simultaneous translation in France, meaning the book has been released in French with the French publisher Albin Michel, and it was released yesterday. So if you are looking for the book in a proper language, you can have it in French. And as for me, I'm working on a lot of stuff. I'm working on a series in French called Bolshoi Arena. It's hardcore sci-fi. I am writing it, and I am working with an artist called Asen who is doing amazing drawings on it. But unfortunately, it's not translated in English yet. Yeah. Hopefully, it will be one day. And otherwise, I'm still doing like my autobio funny comics on Instagram. So if you want to check Instagram.com/BouletCorp, it's like Boulet, like my name, with a CORP at the end, like corporation. I post little comics. It's like autobio fun comics, and they are translated in English. There are subtitles.
Very nice. Definitely have to check that out.
And I was going to mention, so we just to say her name, we had an amazing translator for the French version named Aude Pasquier.
Yes.
Yeah. Astonishing. It was cool. Like, she and I had very long email exchanges about like, why is this funny? Why exactly did you use this word and that kind of stuff. It was really enjoyable. And I felt really good because I contributed a tiny bit to the French translation.
More than me.
I felt like I was very smart one day because I came up with I was talking to Aude, and she said, there's this place called Heidi's Hold, and she was like, there's no, do I have to keep the name Heidi? Because like there's in French there's not a word with the right sound for alliteration, to mean like fortress. And we came up with it popped into my head that Gilles Boulet had illustrated this book series in France called Donjon, so you can say Le Donjon d'Heidi, and it hits that D sound over and over, and it sounds nice. And I guess I might have this wrong. Donjon actually doesn't mean dungeon, right? It means something like tower, or in French.
It can be both. It can be, but it's the tower. Yeah, it's like the highest tower of a castle.
Yeah. So that was cool. I mean, and she's just like I was just marveling. There's a spot in the book where I have like 5 alliterations. Like every word starts with the same letter, and she duplicated it in French. It was just astonishing. So like and she took a lot of creative freedom. So I just feel like if you speak both languages, you should buy both. But in terms of me, I'm best known for a comic called SMBC. You can go to smbc-comics.com, and I post on social media in the usual locations. And I write popular science books with my wife, and I have another one coming out, but it's not announced yet, so I can't say anything about it. That's me.
All right. Well, I definitely want to, thank both of you for taking the time out of your day to, chat about the book. Like I said, I love it, and after I read it to my son, I may have to. I'll probably buy a copy for my college roommate who named his son Beowulf. So
no way. That's a lot to live up to.
But you guys, if you ever have anything else you'd like to talk about, then you're more than welcome to come back, and I'd love to talk to you about it even more. So again, thank you very much, and
thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Oh, not a problem. I try to write. I used the comic. The title of my thing, the comic multiverse, kind of, try to do that and find everything that within just not the the comic, the regular comic books, everything, Yeah. So, and as I said, Beowulf is something I've am familiar with. My older brother will hate me for this, but he and his when he was a senior in college, they made they did like their own adaptation and filmed it, and it's really horrible.
It
can't be worse than Christophe Lambert.
It's on I posted it on my YouTube for him. I'll send it to you.
Oh my God! Yeah, please do.
Okay. Well, he doesn't watch this, so he's not going to see it. So,
Right.
but thank you guys, and be sure to check out the book, buy the book at your comic store or wherever books are sold, but preferably
Yes,
comic book
now.
stores.
No,
Now,
currently.
right now,
Get
and
out and get that book.
all right, have a good one, guys.
Have a good one. Thank you very
Have a
much.
good one. See ya.
You're welcome.